Yeah, Avi, you and Avi.
We have like the same prescription.
Like sluts, I might just keep them.
No! Those frames are expensive.
These frames are expensive.
They're custom made. Now he's 2020.
Now I'm 40-40.
He can see forever.
Did you see past the fourth wall?
What's the future? This panel.
This panel.
Oh man.
He's over there going, how am I going to wrangle these people?
Well, you know what? Let's just talk about your friendship. You guys are obviously best friends.
We've known each other for how long now? Like
15 minutes?
Yeah.
I think we've all known each other here for at least a decade.
Pretty close,
At least
yeah.
a decade. You stop counting after a while. That's how you know your friends. Like, how long have you known each other? I don't even know, man. It feels like a long time. But
And the cool thing is, like, you know, a lot of times, like for me and Tatum specifically, like I see Jared pretty often because he's a director of the studio, and like if I'm ever out there, chances are I'm gonna run into him. But our schedules may not necessarily coincide because we're both actors and writers, and we do conventions a lot. And a lot of times we only ever really get to see each other at cons, and even though we live 15 minutes,
like 15 minutes apart, but we have to come to a different state to hang out.
Yeah, pretty much. But and the cool thing is, like, whenever we do, like, even if it's like months apart before we ever really like get to see, like, we pick up where we left off. That's the really cool thing about it.
That's so sweet.
We're all friends. We're all good.
So, I mean, obviously, then there's a lot of camaraderie between voice actors. Are there any rivalries?
And there's like some
There's a couple.
some frenemy rivalry.
Friendly rivals.
From time to time. But,
Are you going to talk about it?
I feel that we should.
A couple of them make it very apparent.
Yeah, I don't know. It's usually in good fun. It's usually an act that they put on to kind of, you know, feed the fan base a little bit of, you know, comedy here and there. I don't think I've ever had if I've ever had a rivalry, it's usually with me. Like, who is that guy? That's you. I don't like it.
He's better looking than I am.
He's better looking than I am. I like his glasses. But I think, in honest, like, there's not a lot of. I can't think of a single like genuine rivalry where like you have people that are like that guy, because we're all actors and we're all kind of in the same boat. And voice acting in particular is such a niche industry that you don't meet a lot of people that understand the struggle. Yeah. I mean, think about it for a second. Like, I was talking about this with Chris Kaysen once years ago. He was like, man, I would love to be a doctor or an architect just to have like a one-name job that everyone goes, oh yeah. Because, you know, like, you say you're going to get your hair cut, and your stylist is like, hey, what do you do for a living? And you go, oh, I'm an actor. Well, we can't exactly do that. I mean, it's true, but we have to give more detail. Well, I'm an actor. Well, I'm a voice actor. Well, I mean, I do dubbing. And so, like, each layer, they're like, okay, you're losing me a little bit with each layer. They'll say, like, oh, I don't know what anime is. So it'd be nice to be like, so now I just tell people, I'm like, oh, I'm a realtor. Right. Just to cut the conversation short.
And then occasionally you'll get the barber or someone that does know anime, but you know, as you're going through the conversation, you're like, oh, I just watched subtitles.
I can't tell you how many times, like, this is totally off topic, but I can't tell you how many times at a con you see someone cosplaying like one of your favorite characters, and you think, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna like photobomb them as they're taking a selfie, or I'm gonna go up and be like, hey, how's it going? And think it's gonna be really awesome, and they turn to you and go, who are you? And you're like, oh, they've never heard. So, I've had someone, I was outside, it was years ago now, and someone, a bunch of people were talking to me, and I was just like, you know, chilling, and they were like, oh yeah, and then somebody comes over, a very, very inebriated friend of theirs comes over, and he's like, guys, come on, we gotta go. And they're like, dude, this guy does Sebastian. And he turns to me and he's like, oh, let's hear it. And so I'm like, hello, la 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 la, and he goes, dude, you're pretty good, they should have gotten you to do it. Well, from your lips to God's ears. Moral of the story, we're all friends because only other voice actors understand that kind of, like, can we just drink and talk about what just happened?
well done, and I feel
Thank
like
you.
they've just gotten better and better. So,
A lot of hard work by a lot of people.
Yeah.
That's very true.
absolutely. Like, do you see? Do you think that more people will start watching dubs now?
I think more people do and have. I mean, just in the past 10 years that we've been doing conventions, we see a lot more. Broadcast dubs have changed a lot too. Like now, frequently the broadcast will come out and people, the first thing people will see is the English dub because it comes out roughly at the same time as the Japanese. So that's changed the landscape.
Is anybody here not familiar, has never heard of the term broadcast dub or simul dub? You know what? 4 months ago, it would have been the whole room. Like it's just even half a year ago, it would have been the whole room, and just one person. Like that's, I think that right there is the answer.
Yeah,
Like, you know.
It's
That's
sure
amazing.
things. It's really good.
All right, cool. So, who is outside of this room? Who would be your favorite voice actor?
Mark Hamill.
Do it!
Do what? Do it. Do what?
Do more ammo.
Your lips to God's ears. I think a couple of people just got the joke. No, yeah, Mark Hamill was a great inspiration for me. Actually, two voice actors that were a big part of my childhood, Elisa Marsh and Rob Paulson. You're here this weekend,
Yeah.
like Pinky and the Brain,
Yeah.
Animaniacs, like those.
Absolutely.
That was the first cartoon that my parents would watch with me, like proactively watch with me, and they would laugh at it hardcore. And like it was so important to me,
Yeah.
and like just to have to get to share the same space with them and get to meet with them is not only surreal but just insanely cool.
And both really nice guys.
Yeah.
Very down to earth. You know, they would have every right above most of the other people here to be like, what do you want, kid? Get away from me. But they're not like that at all. They're just really nice people.
Yeah, that's true. It's always really cool to meet someone that you looked up to in your own career and thinking, because I'm very nervous when I meet, someone that I put on a pedestal, and I'm always like, oh, I'm gonna mess this up. I'm gonna be like, hi, Mom. Because in your head you have this whole dialogue where you're like, hello, I'm a huge fan of yours, and I just want to know how much you inspire me, and what comes out is.
We were talking about that yesterday.
Uh-huh.
There's an old saying, never meet your heroes, and the implication is that because they won't be what you think they are, what they fail to mention is don't meet your heroes because you're more likely to make a fool out of yourself.
Yeah.
It happened when I met Mark Hamill.
You met Mark Hamill?
I did in Dallas a few weeks, about a little over 2 months ago. It was like all of 3 seconds. He was on his way out of the little green room, and where they had a signing the whole weekend. He was on his way out. And it was just, Mark? And he turns around, he meets my eye, and then at the moment our eyes lock, it's just like every little script that I had written in my head of this is how this moment's gonna go went, bye-bye. And it was just, do you have a moment? What do you want? It was, oh crap, love you, thank you for everything you do. And he just got this big old grin, shook my hand, was like, well, that's very kind of you to say. And then he left, and then I felt like for the next 2 hours. Like, you ever know that feeling like when you get on a really rockin' roller coaster that just gets your adrenaline going, and then for 2 hours after that you feel like dog crap? That's meeting Mark Hamill.
Well, at least he smiled. At least he didn't stare at you weirdly,
Right.
At the end of the Force Awakens. That would have been like if you just
Right, just
So I every now and again, we'll play cons that are more bigger Comic-Con, so you'll get anime voice actors as well as television actors from various shows like the Trek universe or Star Wars and things like that. And I've had a couple of really cool experiences meeting people from those franchises. I think George Takei was my favorite because he's a hero of mine. Such a wonderful, civilized applause. He was going to be at this convention, and I knew he was going to be there, and I was like, oh, I just would love to just shake his hand and say thank you for everything you've done, not only for us as actors, but for those in the LGBT community and whatever. And I was like, I'm going to screw it up. It's going to come out like it always does. And I didn't know when I was going to get a chance to meet him because, you know, at a con, everyone's kind of going back and forth, and their schedules are different, and, you know, sometimes you're at different hotels and different areas of the convention altogether, so you can go an entire weekend without seeing one of the other guests unless you go out of your way. And I was being taken to my autograph table to do my first signing, and it was his table, and he was just leaving, like, to finish it up. And I went, oh, he's at my table. He's sitting in my chair. And he gets up and just says, oh, are you the one sitting here? Very nice to meet you. I kept your seat warm for you. And I swear to God, I just went, he was like the sweetest guy in the world, and he was just like, oh, this is you. I get the whole experience right there in 2 seconds. I'm like, I just got the decay experience. I couldn't have scripted that better myself.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's magic. Magic.
So earlier you were talking about there's different, like every time you have to tell somebody about what you do, you have to like, I'm a voice actor, no, I'm an anime voice actor. So.
You skipped a few steps.
Anything I might know? Well, do you watch Japanese animation? Is that like Naruto?
Pokemon. Yes.
Like those kids with looking for their poker man all
I play online poker. Is that the thing? Sorry.
What I was going to ask is actually, as an anime voice actor specifically, do you find, I mean, like, have you tried to do Western animation voice acting? And is
like
it-
relay stuff.
Yeah.
There's a little bit in Dallas. I've done a little
Yeah.
bit.
Okay.
Mhm.
What's
Video
it-
games too, like video games get done in Dallas now, like Gearbox is
Oh,
in
yeah.
Dallas, so most of us I think have been in games of theirs.
Yeah. Borderlands. Smite, all of Smite is recorded
all
there.
over Smite.
Paladins.
Paladins, whatever. Ruby.
Yeah,
Okay.
Ruby.
It's done in Austin at Rooster Teeth, and it's recorded frequently in Dallas. And so yeah, I mean we're actors, and it just happens to be where we live that the large portion of our work happens to be with Funimation because they're like one of the biggest names in the dubbing industry, if not the biggest really now.
Yeah.
And so that just because of our geography, that's what we do most of in our profession. But we all, you know, there's actually a pretty good VO market in Dallas because it's a big city, and most big cities have needs for like commercial VO, and there's some gaming companies and stuff there. And so yeah, we do a little bit of everything. It just anime happens to be what we're most known for because it's probably what we do more than anything
It's the
else.
most widely distributed.
Yeah,
Indeed. And for you said your question was like, what's the difference?
Yeah, what's the
Like, well, like with prelay, like or working on games like Borderlands and Gearbox, like you have no pre-made animation that you have to match mouth movements or fit your performance into a specific time frame. So with prelay animation or with video games like Borderlands, you just have a script and a rough idea of what the scene is, what your character looks like, and you just get to play. It's a lot more like stage, where you really get to kind of feel it out and try different things and different ideas. Whereas with anime and recording for like JRPGs and stuff, it's really like, okay, well, I got this amount of time within these mouth movements to say this line. Well, I can maybe say it this way or I can say it that way, and it would still make sense. And so it's very limiting in that regard, but that's pretty much the difference.
The difference being, I guess, like you said, like with the prelay, they more or less, you have a script to work with, but the animators animate to your performance, and the opposite is true for dubbing. And dubbing, like the animation's already there, and there's nothing, you can't change it because it's just not permissible and very impractical. So you have to perform to the animation. It's the same skill set, but just a few extra things. I mean, I find it, there are challenges to both. Obviously, with dubbing, you have to be like, oh man, but I want to see it a little longer because I'm feeling it like that, and I can't because
It's an emotional line.
It's an emotional line. And it's like, well, I got to find a way to compress it and still get the same intention out. But if you do that for a long time, like most of us have, when you're given the freedom to just be like, here's what your character looks like, and here's the scene, and just go with it. You're kind of recording in a vacuum. You're like, but I'm so used to having the animation. and having other voices, that are already recorded, so it's kind of weird. And I found when I was recording Sir Hammerlock in Borderlands 2, it was my first experience of doing extensive scene work, just by myself with just the script and no animation. We didn't even have a concept design of the character at that point. They just had a rough idea of what he was going to kind of feel like, but they didn't know, well, he may be this, he may be this, here's a bunch of different sketches. So I'm like, all right, whatever I do is what they're going to go with. And so that freedom was a little terrifying. And it was a little disorienting at the same time. I mean, you get used to it, but it was coming from doing so much dubbing, I was like, there's no animation, we have beeps. And they're like, what beeps? What cue beeps? I was like, oh, never mind. I had to explain to a prelay studio I was doing work with a few months ago. They were like, oh, cool, can you give us a gasp? And I was like, do you want an anime gasp? Or like an actual gasp? Right, because there's a difference, like in an anime gasp, as we call it the Clinkenbeard, because I think she was the first one to like do it.
The old out and in.
The old out and in. It's that's an anime gasp, because that's typically how they're animated, so we've just all learned that's kind of,
And it's really because you don't hear it.
Yeah, it
doesn't play, and so you need a little
but-
something there to let them know that you did anything.
Yeah. So
And
when
there's
I asked-
varying degrees of the
Yes, there are.
You can have the subtle, or you can have the.
So you
Throw
have
a little rasp
in there, get some texture. So I had this conversation with these prelay engineers, and they were like, "What's the difference?" And I was like, "Oh, well, that's anime, and I guess just normal gas." And they were like, "Oh, there is a difference." They were like, "Can you do both?" I just blew their minds. I was like, "Sure," and they were like making notes. That's an anime gas. Will other actors know what that is? Like, oh yeah, they'll know. It's really funny. I was like,
You're so versatile.
I'm gonna put anime gasping on my resume.
I haven't worked in other stuff other than anime as much as these guys have, but the few things I have, I find that they're surprised at your ability to control the timing of what you're doing.
Oh.
They're blown away by it. They don't get it. They're like, oh, it's good, but we need it a little bit shorter. And you're like, how much shorter? I'm like, oh, just like a second or two. And then you're like, oh, got it. And you do it again, and it's a second or two shorter, and they're like, oh my God, that's amazing. And you're like, no, that's what we
It's like,
do
that's
all
what we
the
do.
time.
Like, I've been in situations, the same thing every time. They're like, and the engineers, like, God love them, they want to take care of you, so they're like, oh, it's such a good read, it's so perfect, but we need like half a second shaved off. And they ask you, like, they're asking you, can you do it one more time without an eye? I mean, they're totally like, I'm so sorry. Like, I'm going to be like, how dare you, my lord? It must be exactly 31 seconds. No. And you just go, yeah. And then you turn and look at them when you're done, and they go, excuse me, they go, certain things that being a voice actor for anime dubbing really like gives you an edge in commercial demos or commercial timing.
It's always funny to me, like seeing like those special features and stuff on some of the older like Ghibli movie, like the special features behind the scene where they're interviewing like Hollywood like majorly known on-camera actors that are coming in and dubbing over Miyazaki films, and almost inevitably every single one of them at some point will be like, it's so hard. Like, it's just, because you're matching something that's already existed, and like we see this today, we're just like, oh honey, please.
Like you said, we all saw like the really awesome Hugh Jackman like ADR thing where he was like in the booth for Logan. He was like doing all this fighting, and like people were like, "This is amazing," and I was like, "Bitch, that's a Tuesday." I mean, he was awesome explaining it for him. That's probably a Tuesday as well. But we were like, "Wow, how do you do that?" And we're like, "What do you mean? That's the job. Like that's just what we do." It's kind of awesome. It's nice when people are impressed with something you do that you're like, "Oh, I didn't know that was impressive."
I had no idea.
Yeah, wait for it. Mind blown.
So are there any things, like any pet peeves about voiceovers that you guys have? Like maybe if you hear a voiceover from somebody else and you're like, why did they do that? Like, or...
Well, I think just by nature of working at Funimation, when we see something that the flaps don't match at all, or the company obviously didn't care if they did, it drives us nuts because they're like, we have to match that stuff, and they don't even care. And sometimes
Hey Josh, talk about Issei.
Don't listen to him.
No. I'll be the harem king. See, there you go. But yeah,
Oh, go on.
kind of expanding on that, like a lot of times you'll have like because when the Japanese are animating, so more often than not, the materials that we're going to be getting are the broadcast materials.
Yes.
So it's they're usually they'll be chomping at the bit trying to just draw something as fast as they can because they're trying to meet their own broadcast deadlines and stuff. So we'll get a moment where the dialogue will just continue, in a straight line as I'm talking here, but the flaps will suddenly stop for no particular reason, just at random intervals, but the actors will just keep talking, and the translation will just keep on going.
Whoa.
We have to make that work without sounding like we're being William Shatner.
Muppet flaps. We call them Muppet flaps. Which it happens. It's just like characters saying, "Hello, how are you? It's nice to meet you." And they're like going in this monologue, and there are dramatic pauses in it, but the whole time it's just like ma 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 ma. You're like, there's not. That's a 3-minute long, pauseless, just like barrage of flaps. And there's been a lot of. I mean, it's sometimes in certain shows. It's also just the style. Sometimes you're like, well, that's hysterical, but how are we gonna?
Hello, how are you? I went to the store recently. Did you enjoy yesterday? It was great. Oh.
Are you improving the rest of that? Is that what's going on?
No.
Oh no,
usually,
that's the writer's job to make sure that gets in. And Josh and I, as writers, we run into that a lot. It's not so much a pet peeve as it is just the sort of challenges that go with the job description. But when you're adapting a Japanese script into or localizing it into English, Japanese and English are really different languages. I don't know if you guys are aware of that. They don't even right? I think years ago when I was a kid, I used to think that all languages were like, oh, they're like the same. So like this word always means this and this and that's ridiculous because that's not it at all. It's like the way my partner is fluent in Japanese and he will frequently explain things and I'm like, why? Why did they do that? And there's all sorts of crazy things, little subtleties in Japanese dialogue that make it just part of their sort of dramatic vocabulary whenever they're creating a show. Things that just aren't even conceivable in English because English doesn't work like that. For example, in Japanese, there's a thing called keigo, which refers to a way you can conjugate verbs differently to reflect the relationship of the person you're speaking to. What? So you conjugate verbs differently if the person's older or younger or a boss or a lover or whatever, and it's like, and there are wonderful subtle undertones to that conjugation in a dramatic setting that a Japanese native-speaking audience will totally get that just does not carry over in English because we don't have anything like that at all. We were talking about this the other night, how frequently in dramatic monologues, you'll notice, for those of you that watch the Japanese as well as the dub, that frequently when there's like a mental line or there's a long sequence of what we would call like a monologue or soliloquy, there are pauses in between parts of the sentence that just you'd never do in English intentionally. Like say the phrase, watashi wa nihongo ga sukoshi wakarimasu, which just means I have a little bit of Japanese. Watashi means like I or me or whatever, it depends on how it's being used, but it's a personalized like subjunctive and you kind of sit there. But you will frequently hear like, watashi wa no name, and it's perfectly suitable, it's traditional to kind of do it. There's nothing really like it in English, but the literal translation, if you were so inclined, would be like, I have a little bit of Japanese. And it comes across as very weird in English because we're just not used to that. That's not how our tastes have developed in English over the centuries that English has been a thing. So there are a lot of, not peeves, but little challenges you run into where like little particle words that don't exist in English at all, like was and no's and things like that come in and they'll frequently have their own little island of flaps in the middle of these things. So you're like, la 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 la, no, la 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 la. And so you'll frequently, how many times, do you say like nani? Nani is a good example. Where they go, nani, there are 4 ways I typically will write that, which nani means literally just what, or huh. I would say it's like an expression of what. But we frequently will write, depending on the nature of the scene, we'll be like, the hell? Or what? Or what? You know, like, it just depends, but like,
No
say
way.
it. No way. Yeah, there's always certain things like, well, there can only be that.
It's also depending on the amount of flaps, because sometimes they'll animate Nani as 2 big flaps, or it'll be 1 quick flap that you can fit just either 1 syllable in or 2, or sometimes you'll have that animation issue where Nani will be 5 flaps for whatever reason.
Like, that doesn't even fit in Japanese. So yeah, it's really fascinating. I think it really makes me think about language and how we use it in everyday interactions, because it's something that the dramatic writer thinks about all the time and should. And getting to localize a script that's completely written totally different, that has no relationship whatsoever except a handful of borrowed words to the language it's being adapted into, really makes you think, wow, that's a concept we don't even have in English, because that's just not something that ever made it over here or that we didn't arrive at on our own. So it's really fascinating. I've learned a lot about how English works by just, or certain things that English speakers take for granted, that other countries, other languages go, what? Huh? One of my favorite things to point out in English, and this is something I think all of you should think about, English, especially used in a dramatic context, whether it's Shakespeare or The Big Bang Theory, like, seriously, it's all the same.
Fine line between.
I know, yes. But, you know, in a dramatic context, whether we're talking comedy or straight up drama, you know, the thing about English speakers and English audiences, even in day-to-day life, we never quite say exactly what we mean. There's always a subtext that is either to be understood or that we don't want to touch because it's too uncomfortable.
Right.
My example that I always like to use is, like, let's say you're in line at the Starbucks and someone cuts in front of you, and most of you would probably say something to that person, but depending on your level of patience and how badly you need your coffee, you might say something along the most of us, I assume, would say something along the lines of, excuse me, I believe I was meant. That's not what you mean. That's just a very nice way of saying, bitch! You know, so it's kind of interesting. So subtext is kind of there and lodged into, but it's never you know, another example of in Japanese sometimes, you know, Japanese language serves a very commentating function. Like I'm just going to kind of say what's going on because it doesn't. So my partner lived in Japan for a couple of years, and whenever like an earthquake would hit, as frequently will happen in Tokyo, the building would start shaking. Now let's imagine for a moment that you know we're sitting here, and God forbid an earthquake strikes and the room starts shaking, and all of us would start vocalizing. What kind of things would you say? What? Earthquake, whatever. But this happened, and it's really funny when you think about it, but it's, again, just the culture and how they use language and how it's different than us. We're not saying whatever, you know what's happening, I'm just going to tell you what I think about it. But in Japan, everyone would kind of go, oh, you need to do, everyone would say it, which literally means it's shaking. So, but the relationship is different. It's not like it's not like they're turning to each other like, you get that, it's shaking. You got it. You know, it's not that. It's shaking. They're just kind of, they use language as kind of a commentary, you know, in certain settings. In other settings, they will leave things out that it's your job to assume. Like when they, chotto, they say that all the time. They'll say chotto, which just means it's a little, but then there's just like ellipses or emo dots, as somebody called them once, which I love. Emo dots. Like if someone were to come up to you and be like, what do you think of this outfit I'm wearing? And if they think that it's atrocious, you know, they'd be like, which just means it's a little, fill in the blank, but it's understood. You're just supposed to get it as a Japanese speaker that, that means that I should go change. You know, so things like that, it's just fascinating to me. I don't even remember what the question was now. Pet peeves about pet peeves. Oh, let me tell you about pet peeves.
This isn't a pet peeve, but it's something you should pay attention to. And just because directing now, I notice it every time. If you ever see a scene where someone is out of breath and they're breathing, they'll stay in the same rhythm, and if they go over a cut, the last breath before it goes over the cut will be the same breath that you just did So you'll breathe out twice, or you'll breathe in twice, because for some reason there's a breath lost in that cut somewhere. But it's so regular that it must be a thing. They have to do it on purpose.
Yeah.
I wonder. There must be some like understood.
That's exactly what
We
it's
pass out a lot in the booth.
And you can guarantee it's going to be like that every time. They'll go, okay, do I start on an out or an in? Where does it end on this thing? Well, it ends on an out, which means after it goes over the cut, there's going to be another out. Okay, just trust me.
Or inevitably it will be this pace on the shot that's like of the character's face, and then on the next shot where it's like behind them, the rhythm will have changed.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
they'll be shot change.
I love really like weirdly specific flaps when it's a laugh or a cry. It's hard. There's a scene in the movie Summer Wars, which is a brilliant film, where Brina's character has this really emotional moment. It's such a beautiful moment, but the flaps are very specific, and she just starts crying, and it kind of ramps up from a, to a straight up bawling. It's so real, but Brina's like, how? Oh my God. She's like, that's the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, because it's hard to control. Like once you even getting to where you can cry realistically is hard enough in acting, but then being able to do it to two specific flaps is a whole other level. Laughing is a little easier.
Yeah.
Because you can be like, ha ha ha, hoo, ha ha ha, but it's things like that. I don't know, it's fun to meet those challenges, but every day you go in the booth like, what? Oh, I didn't wake up this morning thinking this was going to be a thing I had to grapple with. Interesting.
Well, what's the hardest laugh that you guys have had to match?
Laughs in general, like it's just if they just go forever, for me is the challenge, because to laugh like that requires an enormous amount of breath control, and you only can have so much breath, especially if you're having to do some sort of big, long, bombastic, like over the top villain laugh. If they just keep on going, and then sometimes they'll go like from open mouth, and then they'll start giggling, and they'll be all like they'll be like that very sinister kind of smile. So you have to be able to kind of go from a to a so they can just consistently follow those in and out, and or God forbid, like with the case of Brina's thing, they'll add like their mouth will go like really small, so then you're going stuff is just, and then you have to keep your breath while you do that. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, One Piece laughs, like the villains in One Piece all have like very specific laughs, so it's like it's not just a ha 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 or a ha ha ha, it's like it's a yeah ha ha, it's a or like it's something totally crazy, and sometimes that makes it easy because you're laughing at how silly it sounds because it's supposed to be funny, so you're like well, that's actually very real. I actually laugh like that.
And then there are the things that you're going to choose to cover up the sounds that the Japanese have, the reactions that we just don't have, because people wouldn't be. My favorite is that.
Oh yeah.
We don't have anything for that. Nobody does that.
Every vampire in every anime sounds like. That's when they have their teeth, and I'm like, bro, that's just what a Japanese vampire sounds like. Seriously, go back and watch it. Everything is like in the Japanese. It's like.
It's like an angry kitten.
I'm sorry, that made me think of something totally unrelated. I was in a group for a game recently, and I had a director that was like, I don't know how to describe what I need. It's weird, but you're going to be playing like an eel. And I'm like, try me. It's not that weird. And they were like, okay, well, like do some reaction. Let's just find the voice. And I was like, all right. And I did some things, and he's like, no, it needs to be more like an eel. And I'm like, I scuba dive. I've heard eels. You know what they sound like? They don't sound like anything. So I'm just like. And he's like, yeah. All right. Thank God there weren't flaps to match on that one. So, oh no, you're falling back. It's too humid. You're falling out of the eel. The same director told me to laugh, and I laughed. And he's like, oh man, you lost the British. I'm like, we all laugh the same. Oh, that's definitely, that's a Yorkshire laugh. Well, they should have gotten you.
Because I'm sure that's what they thought a British laugh was. You don't have enough attitude. Like, I don't hear the arrogant stick up my butt.
I don't hear all the villains in the Death Star. Do you have a flare? This is my pet peeves, and this is just kind of a wider general voice acting thing, not related to anime, but I love, there are two, broadly speaking, there are two kinds of directors. There are directors that are totally invested in the material and they're really excited and they'll do their best to communicate what they need and they'll work with you. And there are others who are like, they're completely baffled by the material and they're just there to get through their day and they're like, can you do it? Because I don't know what I want. And it always ends up being a journey where you'll like be in the booth. And there, most studios, you can see out into the console room. There's like a painted glass or a window or something that you can look out at. And there's nothing more disheartening than like, reading ad copy and being like, all right, I'm reading this ad and this range and this copy and you feel like you nailed it. Well, that's a good thing. And you look out and you just see like the director and the engineers and the producers go. Let's go, big guy. Just kind of go, awesome, I feel really good about it.
But having been on the other side of the glass, oftentimes we're doing things like, well, I don't know, what do you want to do for lunch? Because I don't want to do what we did yesterday because the tuna roll was too spicy for me. And that really could be what they're talking about. You don't know, but as an actor, you're so self-conscious about what you're doing. You're like, oh, they hate me.
Or when they leave the mic on when they should have turned it off. Like, yeah, that's good. Click, and they think it's off. Oh my God, we should have gotten Josh Haley. And I'm like, I can hear you, and they go, we know.
Now, in all fairness, sometimes there are some of us that, if we've been friends for long enough, we'll do that on purpose.
Oh yeah,
Just to mess with each other.
Oh yeah.
You're like, is it too late to recast this?
My great Harlan does stuff with us all the time. We're like, well, I guess the needle on the acting meter twitched, so we can use it. Par. Thanks for phoning it in. Thanks for tumbling out of bed and doing the line. Appreciate it. Like it's moving on. Or Jerry's ever seems fine. That is effusive praise from Jerry.
That'll be all right.
Seems fine. No one's gonna get mad about that.
Or, well, that's how that line is.
Or my favorite these days is kids are gonna love it. It's great.
So, on that note, I think we're gonna go ahead and open up for Q&A. We have about 20 minutes left, so let's see if we can get some questions. The
Check,
mic
check,
is
mic.
over here, please line up.
Is the microphone on over there?
Check mic 1, 2.
Mic check coming.
Did you turn the mic on? Is it plugged in? Try spinning it.
Try spinning it.
I looked like 5 feet away. Why?
Flash!
What the?
Every question.
Are we going?
Hey!
Alright, pretty big. We're going to keep this to one question at a time because we want to get to as many of you as possible. So go ahead and line up.
Alright, my question is, when you audition for an anime, do they give you clips of the anime or do they just...
What's auditioning?
We just get cast now.
Auditioning is what new people do. once in a blue moon, they may give you clips if we have the materials. Most of the time, all the time, you get what are called audition sides, where you'll have like sample lines and a breakdown of the character and usually a visual.
Yeah.
But that's usually all you have to work with.
Yeah, the only studio that I've ever worked with that consistently did, like, you would audition to entire scenes that were, like with the animation was ADV Films back in the day. But no, Funimation always just has a little printed out sheet, synopsis of the character, kind of what they're looking for, and like 5 or 6 lines, and you just go in and do it.
Yeah.
Hello. Hi. I do a couple of laps. Or you can do a couple of laps around the studio doing high kicks, singing "I'm a Little Teapot."
Be careful not to run into other actors doing the same thing.
Or you can step in time.
I usually spend the time because I live about 30 minutes away from the studio now, and so I'm in the car warming up, usually singing or just saying lines or laughing or things like just kind of getting my voice awake. And it's really interesting when you're like at a stoplight and you're like blah 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 ha ha, and you turn and someone's looking at you.
That's my favorite now, being on the expressway, the 635 expressway now, heading out there, because I'll do like, depending on like the character that you're going to be doing that day, like you'll get in that voice, and I'll do like the thing that Ian taught me, like you go through my vocal warm-up takes about 30 minutes, you go through the entire alphabet 5 times for each vowel, so you'll start with like A, bay, 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 say, day, 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 fay, and just keep going through that the whole freaking time, and you're just driving along going, day, 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 and inevitably someone catches you like that. What are they singing? That looks like a simple tune.
I just want to go on public transportation now and do that.
Yes.
Okay, so at the risk of slings and arrows at my back, I need you to drift back a little bit to when you weren't so awesome, and you actually had an agency, and you had to audition on the whim. So what sort of jobs would you recommend for people who are trying to get into this business to get their income and say, oh, hey, by the way, I got an audition next day, so see ya. You know, what job would allow that?
You're so bitter.
I'm ready for my big bet, all right?
So the thing about we do still audition frequently. That was a joke. I mean, sometimes we'll just get cast because they're like, oh, there's a character wearing glasses. Get Tatum. Things like that happen a lot, but we still audition. And for like commercial work, we're represented by agencies. I think most of us or whatever. And that's where we still have to audition for people frequently that have no idea or care about anything else we've done. So we're nobodies to them. And you're like, hello, nice to meet you. So every day is a humbling experience. But as far as having jobs that are conducive to the acting life, it's typical service industry stuff, like wait jobs, things where you can find people to cover your shift. I mean, it's really hard to hold down a traditional 9 to 5 and still have an open enough schedule that you can answer an audition. My partner Brandon does stage acting, but his 9 to 5 job is as a web developer. Somebody has to support us. But it's really difficult for him to juggle sometimes. He's lucky enough to be good enough at what he does as a web developer that they'll let him work remote at times, so he can travel or he can take half a day and go off for a couple hours to do this theater audition or to go to Funimation if they want to put him in something. So, but it took him about 5 years doing what he does to get to that point with his company where they're like, it's fine, you can work a half day today. So it's really, it's a struggle, and for most people that want to be actors that are trying to get into it, you're going to be an actor and something else for a very long time before you're just an actor. I'm still not just an actor. I'm an actor and a writer. Yep. Writing is how I support myself. I mean, because the work is more regular. There's always need of script work, whereas the voice acting is more sporadic and very difficult to rely on to pay the bills, because one month might be feast and the next month might be famine. So if you want to get into acting, acting is almost never, however many years you've been doing it, it's almost never ever going to be your primary source of income. And
until I started working for Funimation 5 years ago, actually working for them as an ADR director, I had a full-time job the whole time. I own everything you've heard me in over the past 16 years. I recorded between the hours of 6 at night and 10 at night.
What was your job?
I worked in a warehouse. Big industrial metal stuff, welding and turning down metal shafts and a lot of assembly. Woo!
Yeah, but before I was a writer, I worked at a gas station for a time. For 2 or 3 years, I delivered cookies to
Oh,
people.
yeah, I remember.
Love that job.
Nobody's ever angry to see the cookie man. But I mean, like you find what works. You find the job that will give you that little bit of leeway. And usually part-time work is a lot more forgiving of it than like a full-time job. But if you're lucky enough to land a full-time job that'll also let you go and do that thing, then stick with that. You're welcome.
I'm not sure they get paid for the budget. It seems like they get paid.
Employment.
Hi.
That's normal. You're ready.
What are you talking about? I mean, all of this sounds my way.
It's weird. Like the first time I ever did anything for like just being in the booth and putting the headphones on for the first time, and like when you hear yourself with no other environment, like in the booth, it's just you. There should not be any other sounds. The first time you just hear you with nothing else interfering, you're just like, whoa. That's me. It's like that. Like, anybody ever see Emperor's New Groove?
Yeah.
Is that my voice? Is that my voice? It's like that's really is. It's just like, oh my god, that's what I sound like to people.
And that's because out in the open, when you speak, you hear your own voice as you're speaking.
Yeah.
But what you're hearing is the resonance in your head.
Right.
You know, and then when you hear it back, you don't have that resonance anymore. You're like, where did all my manly bass go? No wonder I keep getting cast as teenagers. I'm never gonna be a man.
Poor Jared. I feel like he needs a hug.
I'm 40 years old. I'm still playing teenagers.
It's weird. It takes getting used to. I mean, any kind of acting, when you see yourself, it's depressing for two reasons. One, because you're like, oh my god, I didn't know I sounded like that. Because you're never going to sound like yourself to yourself, because like you said, you hear it through your own head. It's a totally different sound. But it's also like when you see your work, you're like, man, I had such a great experience doing that scene or doing that episode or doing that series. And you go and watch it. It's done. It's over. It's kind of depressing. Oh well, there's nothing I can do about it now. I can't change that. And you're always going to focus on what you thought was wrong. It's just how people are. You're always going to be like, oh my god, how do I get work? I don't understand. That's just you get over it after time. Just by just forcing yourself to sit down and listen to it or watch it, which I think you have to do, especially early on in your career. I don't do it so much anymore.
Best thing I ever did was stop watching anything I was in.
I will let y'all watch it,
That's
and
right.
I will live in your positive view of the work. It's much healthier. So.
Thank you.
Thank you. This question is primarily for Josh, but you guys feel free to comment as you want.
What's up?
That's what you guys do. Josh, you inherited the role of Issei Kyoto on High School DxD for
Yes.
season 3. Is it weird coming into to inherit a role like that from somebody else?
Yeah.
And what is it? Do you feel any sort of pressure to try to mimic the voice of the previous one from previous seasons, or do you just kind of just go for it?
No, yes, it was very weird, and it was a very unfortunate set of circumstances as to why I had to do it in the first place, which made it very kind of uncomfortable at first. But like a lot of people love that show. It's with giant sparkly boobies aside, it is a very funny show, and a lot of people really love it. And so I did have I did feel kind of a little bit of pressure. It's like people had invested in the previous actor's performance for 2 seasons at that point, and to step in at that, but like that's scary, but. I think part of the reason why they asked me to do it is because Scott and I had a very similar range. We had kind of a similar sound. We had played off of each other very often over several years, but thankfully they weren't expecting me to do any sort of imitation, because like to try and just imitate somebody else's performance or whatever, it's not fun. Like part of the art of this whole thing is to be able to make it my own as well. So they were very cool in saying, your voice is close enough to him that we don't think it'll be much of an issue, but we do want you to be able to make it your own. So this from now on, it's your version of you say, not trying to imitate. So.
And when you get right down to it, not terribly different than what all of us do all the time.
Yep.
We're dubbing anime, because we're stepping in to localize a character that the audience often already has a profound relationship with. And we're having to sort of, not compete, that's the wrong word, but I can't think of a better one. We're having to kind of grapple with, your own personal first impression of the character. That's, we're never going to sound like that.
Right.
There's no way of knowing what you had in your own head. So all we can do is be honest and genuine and hope that you'll, slowly warm to it and let us join the long. When you come from a stage background, as most of us come from,
like how many people have played Caesar?
Yeah, or
like
Hamlet. You don't walk into it going, "Oh my God, people are gonna hold me against Kenneth Branagh if I play Hamlet." I mean, you make your piece early on. Like if you're doing stage work, you almost never get to originate a role. Everything's been done countless times before. So you just learn to think of it as, well, I'm just I'm now part of this large family of people who have all put their hat into that character, and I just get to be part of it. It's wonderful to think of it too, is like, well, this character is so wonderful and so interestingly written and conceived of by the original animators and original writers that anybody could come into it with their own perspective and make it seem real, because that's just how wonderfully real the character is. It can hold a lot of contradictory interpretations and still feel like it has a home in every single one of them. That for me is the litmus test of an authentic performance, is if it's totally different than what you expected, but still somehow real. Because the mind is always riveted to what's real, even if it doesn't speak to your experience.
Thank you. Season 4, soon, Craig Martin.
Yeah, thank you very much. Adam, right? What's up, dude? Yeah, dude, yeah.
Just a heads up, right before you do your question, we do only have 5 minutes left, so rapid fire.
Sounds good. What's your question, buddy?
Yesterday during a panel, a voice actor mentioned that she got started in voice acting work by being mentored by a different voice actor. Has anyone ever asked you to mentor them in voice acting? And if not, what would you say if someone did?
God.
Right. It's like I don't see myself as like having, like, yeah, I have a lot of experience, but I don't know if I would necessarily am good at teaching. Like if I would be necessarily mentor material. Like I had someone mentor me, not necessarily in voice work, but Charlie Campbell showed me the ropes way early on. Charlie Campbell, and I don't know, like it really helped a lot, but I don't know if I necessarily have the confidence in myself to be able to be like, oh, here, let me show you the ropes, young Padawan. Like,
yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think everybody in every business has someone that mentors them, either whether they know they're mentoring you or not.
That's a good point.
I do try. I love the idea of the mentor, and I come from a long line of teachers. So one day I would like to teach. I don't think I'm ready yet. But then again, I don't think anyone ever feels ready to teach. If you're a good teacher, I think the teacher is open to just learning alongside someone, and it's a very vulnerable position. But I think it just depends on the person and what they were looking for. For me, it's all about motivation. Like, what are they looking for out of this? And do I think, their pursuit, their reasons for doing this is healthy? Like, some people want to get into acting for the wrong reasons. They want to get into acting because they
want to be famous.
Or they want to be rich or something. And I'm like, that's not a good, even if that were possible, and it usually isn't. it's just not a good reason to do anything, because being famous is stupid. Like, it doesn't do anything for you. Like, it's a phantom. It doesn't exist. It's much better to be in a position where you can just like be fulfilled by the work. And if I were to meet someone that's like, oh, I just want to act because I just love the craft and I want the opportunity to apply it, then I would be on board. But like, cool, let's learn together and see how we can make this happen.
I would say like my biggest mentors would be the actors that I gravitated to the most growing up. Like the people that I constantly latched onto their voice and tried to imitate what they did. I learned to act through imitating them. And so if anything, they were my mentors, and I think that would be one of the better ways to go about it.
Yeah.
Jerry?
Yes, I agree with both of them.
Thanks, Adam.
Hi.
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 Hi. So follow up on this question. So you and mentors all this. Have y'all like grown up or
No.
He came out this way. Like it was.
Alright, so who when you were either growing up or wanted to become like a voice actor or started acting, who was your mentor person you get inspired by?
Mark Hamill, Anthony Heald, grew up listening to him on audiobooks. Patrick Stewart, the Rob Paulson, Maurice LaMarche, it's like so many different people. I got inspiration from
Mel
Mel
Blanc.
freaking Blanc.
For God's sake, Paul Frees. Orson Welles, a lot of dead guys in my case. Like Vincent Price, Christopher Lee, I mean, yeah, all those guys, I know, right? I grew up watching those guys on old reruns of their like golden era, horror movies careers, and I just, it's so much fun, and I just got into that voice, and I would imitate them, like you're talking about, and kind of oddly discover my own voice by trying to imitate someone else. Marceau's a mime. I learned so much from him, clearly.
What was that? Oh my God! What was the name of the guy? Oh, like what?
Oh God, what's his name?
I know every time
Paul
I think Paul Lentz.
Yeah. Who on Bewitched, the old, like, everyone familiar with that, like, he played the uncle, like, the clearly gay uncle with, like, Samantha. I used to imitate that all the time, so that when I came out, everyone was like, no. It's very helpful to me, actually. So, thank you.
Hello.
So I specifically want to get into your industry, doing basically what all three of you do, the acting, the writing, the directing, and I'm in school specifically for adaptation and doing that sort of thing.
Okay.
I know that you guys, and I've watched literally everything you guys have put up on YouTube or other people have put on YouTube of your panels, and I've taken note of that. You guys also said just do more acting things, go to all the workshops, do all these kinds of things, do the work, but at the same time, if you specifically want to work for a specific company, how do you go about doing it?
Let me speak to this for a second, because it's a very important one, and I admire your passion and your focus on that, but this particular thing that we happen to excel at, just by sheer luck, is a very niche industry. Acting in general is hard enough to break into, and voice acting is harder because it's a niche within a niche. Dub acting is even harder because it's a niche within a niche within a niche, and so on and so forth. The thing about acting, and any creative job, is it's so hard. If you set your sights if your focus is too narrow, you're gonna limit your chances of getting to do what you want to do. So I always tell anyone, like, I love that you're into adaptation and like studying this, but odds are it's only ever going to be one of many things you do. So an actor, any creative person, actor, writer, artist of any kind, the only way to stay current and employed is to cast your net as widely as possible. So while I appreciate your focus and your drive, saying, I want to do that specific type of acting, and I don't really care so much about the others, is kind of like going to architecture school and spending the 7 years to get your degree so you can specialize in designing doorknobs. Do you know what I mean? I mean, because you're going to limit your focus, and the thing is, there are so many things out there that you may not even be aware of as something you are interested in, if you're so myopically focused on this particular avenue, you may not realize, oh my God, I actually really like stage more than I thought I would, or I really like behind the scenes stuff more than I thought I would. And then it's true in any business, but particularly in any creative endeavor, the more you're open to doing, the more you get to do. So my advice to you is, how do you get to do this? Is you do everything, and it falls into place. It becomes it's like acting is a big buffet of things, and you have to be willing to go down the line and do all of it to get to the stuff you really want to do. Does that make sense? Yeah. So just cast your net wide, man. And I promise you, in the offing, you will find so many other things you want to do that you're just as passionate about that you don't even conceive of as a thing you can do now. So good luck.
All right. And I'm sorry, I only have time for our song.
Sorry.
I definitely love you for coming out.
Thank you. You're awesome. So everybody, thank you so much for coming out.
Yes, thank you. Great message. I have autographs at 1. Anyone have autographs?
I'm done. I'm going to the airport. Everybody, please be safe getting home. After all, it is Memorial Weekend, so please be safe and enjoy the rest of the con.
Yes. And I'll see you in half an hour.